Dear listeners, I welcome you to my channel. Leave your comments and impressions, I value your opinion. The incessant rain battered against the windows like the drumming fingers of an impatient visitor. Inside, the world seemed quieter, almost muted against the backdrop of the storm. I was curled up on our faded leather couch, a novel lying forgotten in my lap as my gaze drifted to the clock. Mike would be home soon, or so I thought. My phone buzzed abruptly on the coffee table, slicing through the silence. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected to see, Tom. Heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation, I swiped to answer. Hey, I said, my voice a strained whisper. Laura, I can't believe it. Tom's voice came through, strained and oddly high-pitched. What's wrong? I asked, a cold knot forming in my stomach. It's gone, Laura. I can't use Mike Johnson. Something's wrong with it. The room spun slightly as his words sank in. What do you mean gone? What happened? I demanded, my voice rising in panic. I don't know, it just stopped working. Like it's been hexed or something. The absurdity of the situation should have made me laugh, but instead, a creeping terror took hold. It was then I heard the front door creak open. Mike. His footsteps echoed in the hallway, steady and sure. Tom was still babbling in my ear. I think someone did this to me, Laura. Someone cursed me or something. Tom, I have to go, I whispered urgently and hung up. My heart was a wild drum in my chest as I watched Mike enter the room. His face was unreadable, darkened by the shadows of the dimly lit room. He stopped, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in my pale face and the phone clutched tightly in my hand. Who are you talking to? He asked, his voice deceptively calm. Just a friend, I stammered, trying to sound casual, but the quiver in my voice betrayed me. Mike's lips curled into a smirk, a look I had never seen before. It chilled me more than the cold air seeping in through the cracks in the window. Oh, friend. He took a step closer. Was it Tom, by any chance? I froze, the color draining from my face. How could he possibly know? What have you done, Mike? I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. He laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Me? I haven't done anything. But maybe Tom's misfortune is karma. Maybe it's the universe telling him to keep away from another man's wife. The room felt oppressively small as his words hung in the air. I felt trapped, cornered like an animal. You're insane, I hissed, anger flaring up inside me. You've no right. No right? He cut me off, stepping closer still. I have every right, Laura. You're my wife. And he was my friend. His proximity was overwhelming, and I stumbled back, my phone slipping from my trembling hands and crashing to the floor. You own me, Mike. I yelled, my voice rising over the roar of the storm outside. He paused, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes, hurt, maybe regret. But it was quickly masked as his features hardened once again. We'll see about that, he said ominously before turning and walking out of the room. Left alone, I slid to the floor, my body shaking. What had I gotten myself into? What had Mike done to Tom? And what would he do to me? The questions spiraled in my mind as the storm outside raged on, a mirror to the turmoil within. I didn't sleep much that night, the relentless storm mirroring the chaos in my mind. By the time dawn painted the sky in muted gray, I had made a decision. I needed allies, and I knew just where to start. After Mike left for work, still without a word from last night's confrontation, I dialed Jenna, Tom's sister. If anyone would stand by me now, it would be her. Jenna had always been skeptical of Mike. She had sensed his underlying controlling nature long before I had admitted it to myself. The phone rang only twice before Jenna picked up, her voice laced with sleep. Laura? What's wrong? It's about Tom, I said, skipping any pleasantries. Something strange happened to him, and I think Mike might be involved. What? Slow down, Laura. What happened? Her voice sharpened, alert. I quickly recounted the previous night's events, how Tom had called, panicked about his sudden ailment, and Mike's chilling reaction. As I spoke, my voice grew steadier, fueled by a mix of fear and determination. Jesus, Laura, this sounds insane. You think Mike did something to him? Jenna's disbelief was evident, but not dismissive. I don't know what to think anymore, Jenna, but I need help. Can we meet today? Absolutely. Let's not talk over the phone anymore. Meet me at the Greenhouse Cafe at noon. It's public and safe. I agreed, grateful for her immediate support. After hanging up, I dressed quickly, choosing clothes that might help me blend into the crowd. I didn't know if Mike was watching me, but I couldn't take any chances. The cafe was bustling when I arrived. The usual midday crowd seeking refuge from the dreary weather. Jenna was already there, seated in a corner booth with 2 cups of coffee waiting. She stood as I approached, her face etched with concern. We hugged briefly, a tight, tense embrace. "Tell me everything, Laura," she said as we sat down. As I repeated the story, Jenna's eyes grew wide. This is not like any Mike I knew," she said, shaking her head. "But Tom is really scared, Laura. He's gone to the hospital, and the doctors can't figure out what's wrong." The cafe seemed to close in around me, the chatter of other patrons a dull roar in my ears. "What are we going to do?" I asked, feeling helpless. "That's why I called Brian before you arrived," Jenna said, glancing toward the cafe entrance. "Brian?" I echoed, confused. "Yeah, he's a friend from college. He's now a private investigator. I thought we might need someone who can dig deeper into this, someone who can do it quietly." I was about to respond when a tall man approached our table. He had sharp eyes and a reassuring smile. "You must be Laura," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Brian. Jenna's told me a little about what's going on. I'm here to help however I can." His confidence was comforting, and after a brief discussion where Brian laid out some initial steps for his investigation, I felt a flicker of hope. We devised a plan to keep tabs on Mike's activities and to delve into his past, searching for any clues that might explain his possible involvement in Tom's condition. After Brian left, Jenna squeezed my hand. "We're going to figure this out, Laura. You're not alone in this." I nodded, the weight on my shoulders slightly eased by her assurance. But as I stepped out of the cafe into the drizzling rain, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much worse before they got better. Mike had shown a side of himself that terrified me, and I knew that uncovering the truth might reveal more than I was prepared to handle. After meeting with Jenna and Brian, I returned home, a place that now felt more like a battleground than a sanctuary. I tried to act normal as I waited for Mike to return, rehearsing calm responses to any possible confrontations. My heart raced every time I heard a car pass by, each sound making me jump. When Mike finally came home, he was unusually quiet, his face a mask that didn't quite reach his eyes. We moved around each other like 2 planets in a decaying orbit, bound together by some unseen force but repelling at every opportunity. "Laura," Mike finally broke the silence at dinner. His voice was calm, too calm. "We need to talk." I stiffened, setting down my fork. "About what?" I kept my voice even, hiding the turmoil inside. "About us. About this distance between us lately." He looked at me directly, searching my face for something. I met his gaze, my resolve hardening. "Yes, we do." "What's going on, Mike? Why do you act like you're hiding something?" He sighed, a sound of frustration rather than surrender. "I could ask you the same, Laura. You've been distant, secretive, always on your phone, whispering in corners." I paused, weighing my words carefully. "Maybe I wouldn't feel the need to hide if I felt safe, Mike. Safe to talk to you about anything." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Mike's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. "Is this about Tom?" he asked, his voice low. "It's about everything, Mike. It's about how I no longer know who I'm sharing my life with." Mike stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. "Maybe you never did," he said cryptically before walking out of the room. His words echoed in my mind as I sat frozen. The man I married was slipping away, morphed into a stranger with secrets. Determined to find answers, I called Brian the next morning. "We need to accelerate the plan," I told him, my voice a mix of fear and urgency. "I agree," Brian replied. "I've been doing some preliminary checks. There's something you should know. It seems Mike has been frequenting a small private clinic on the outskirts of town. It doesn't fit with his usual patterns." "A clinic?" My heart skipped a beat. "Why would he go there? Can we find out?" "I'm on it. I'll visit the clinic today and see what I can dig up." "Be careful, Brian," I warned, the seriousness of our investigation becoming more tangible by the moment. Later that day, Brian called me from his car, his voice low. "Laura, you were right to be suspicious. The clinic is not what it appears to be. It's more of a private research facility. I couldn't get much from the staff, but I managed to talk to a janitor. He mentioned seeing Mike meet with some of the doctors late at night. Research facility. My mind raced. What are they researching? Does it have anything to do with Tom? I don't have those answers yet. But I found something else, a connection to a biotech company that was recently penalized for unethical practices. Every word added weight to my fears. Mike's involved in something dangerous, isn't he? I whispered almost to myself. It looks that way. And whatever it is, it's big. The pieces were slowly forming a terrifying picture. Brian, let's meet tomorrow. We need to plan our next steps carefully. Agreed, he replied. We're in this deep, Laura. There's no turning back now. As we hung up, I felt a resolve stealing within me. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore, or even for Tom. I was fighting against something much larger, much more dangerous. I had stepped into a game where the stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. And I had to win. The sun was just starting to dip below the horizon when I met Brian at the small, inconspicuous cafe where we had agreed to reconvene. The air was thick with the promise of rain, mirroring the tension that clung to me like a second skin. Brian slid into the booth opposite me, his face grave. Laura, before we go any further, you need to understand the risks involved here. What we stumbled upon, it's bigger than either of us anticipated. I nodded, my resolve firm. I need to know, Brian. No matter what. He sighed, pulling out a folder stuffed with documents. All right, here's what I found. The clinic Mike has been visiting is a front for a private research lab, which is funded by a major biotech company. This company has been developing experimental treatments for, well, let's just say they're not curing colds. My hands trembled as I took the documents from him, flipping through them. What kind of treatments? Genetic alterations, enhancements, the kind that can change a person's physical capabilities or in some cases disable them temporarily. A chill ran down my spine. Disable them? Like what happened to Tom? Precisely. It seems Mike was part of a trial study. Voluntarily or not, I can't say. But it appears he may have used what he knew to sabotage Tom. Why would he do that? I asked, though part of me feared I already knew the answer. Jealousy? Revenge? It's unclear. But what is clear is that Mike has been deeply involved in this for a long time. As the pieces fell into place, a cold fury settled over me. What do we do now? We expose them, Brian said determinedly. I've already made copies of everything. I'm going to a contact I trust at the local news station tonight. I nodded, feeling the weight of the impending exposure. And Mike? We handle that separately. I think it's time you confronted him, with the police if necessary. The drive home felt the longest of my life. Every turn of the wheels, every stoplight was a moment closer to a confrontation I both dreaded and desperately needed. I arrived home to find Mike sitting in the dark living room waiting. The only light came from the flickering television, casting eerie shadows across his face. Mike, I began, my voice stronger than I felt. I know about the clinic. I know what you've been involved in. He stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Laura, I can explain. No. I cut him off, stepping forward. There's no excuse for what you've done. To me, to Tom, to anyone involved in your experiments. Mike's face changed then, the mask of calm slipping. Laura, you don't understand. I did it for us, to protect you. To protect me? I scoffed. By hurting others? By lying to me? How could that possibly protect me? It's complicated, he said, running a hand through his hair. The company, they'd promised they could fix things. Things between us. They could make me better. Make me the man you deserved. I stared at him stunned. At what cost, Mike? At what cost? Before he could answer, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as they approached our house. Mike's eyes widened in fear as I stepped back, letting the door open as the police stormed in. As they handcuffed him, Mike turned to me, his eyes pleading. Laura, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. I watched numb as they led him away. You lost sight of what the right thing was, Mike, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. The following days were a blur of reporters, police statements, and shocking headlines. The biotech company was raided, the research exposed and condemned. Tom began to recover, the effects of his condition reversing after the company's protocols were revealed and counteracted. Sitting in the now too quiet living room, I realized that the truth had cost me my marriage. But in exchange, it had given me back my freedom, my safety. As I looked around at the home I once shared with Mike, I knew it was no longer mine. It was time to move on, to rebuild from the debris of deception. The story, it seemed, was not about betrayal or revenge, but about redemption and the power of standing up for what is right, even when it feels like the world is against you.